Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, everyone. Hope you're well. My name is Mr. Ali here on ZMC Network with the real story. We're back after 5 weeks after having a bit of restful and a bit of a spiritual break during the holy month of Ramadan and spending Eid with family. And I am back now here on the ZMC network. I hope you're keeping well as well, and I hope you've had a fantastic restful period as well during the month, and also enjoy the bank holiday weekend as well. For those of you who are off on half term as well and off from work as well, I hope you're in a good spirit and you're managing to recharge your batteries. And today, as always, I am going to start off my show by talking about the latest Indian variant that is impacting on the COVID dashboard. So these are the latest figures for Birmingham. Total a rise in positive cases within Birmingham. So there's 481 positive cases versus 279 the week previous. That means that for every 100,000 population, we have 42.1 compared to the previous week of 24.4. In terms of what this means for the respective areas, for the respective wards, it is Heartlands that has the highest ward, 246, Newtown, which is 137, Garrett's Green, 121, Borsley Green, which has 102, Small Heath, which has 83, Brook and Russell Heath, which has 80, and then Perry Bar, which has 78. Today we are going to be talking about a topic that has been dominating the airwaves both in the mainstream and also on social media, which is Palestine. And we are just going to be discussing what now. The ceasefire is in place, but it's gone off the news. What does that mean for the people of Palestine, and what does that mean for the international partners? To help me discuss this particular topic, we have a young Palestinian by the name of Shahem Shams, who is going to help me give me a bit of context and background to the whole recent conflict it means for the Palestinian people as a result of the recent election in Israel, whereby Netanyahu is no longer the Prime Minister, and also the cancelled elections in Palestine as well. So welcome to my show. Hope you're well, and let's get this topic going.
Are
you there?
Yes. Could you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yeah, could you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you for having me. Well, to start off with the background of the story, we've seen all over the world in the past couple of weeks, people in all of Palestine and all over the world have been taking the streets, fighting against the forced displacement of Palestinian families in Sheikh Jarrah and the Israeli agenda of further Jewidization of occupied land, as well as Israel's assault on Palestinians in Al-Aqsa Mosque and the brutal assault on Gaza. To go in further detail, the US-owned private company Nehalat Shimon is planning to build 200 illegal settlement units in Sheikh Jarrah. Ultimately, the plan will lead to the forced displacement of 28 families, up to 500 people. The Israeli court has only delayed the hearing on the eviction, meaning that the families are still facing the threat of expulsion. And recently, a settler organization known as Ataret Kohanim, which receives significant funding from the American Zionist Irving Moskowitz, is working to ethnically cleanse 87 Palestinian families, which is up to 600 to 800 people in Batn al-Hawa neighborhood in Silwan, which is only one of the 12 neighborhoods which are targeted. This is the background of the story.
Thank you. So the pictures that I first witnessed was of the Israel Defense Forces and the police firing tear gas and bombs and rubber bullets into Masjid al-Aqsa during the holy month, the blessed month of Ramadan, which was completely unacceptable. I think, is it right that they've got their own barriers and they had this new one-way system to in order to let the congregation go into the Masjid al-Aqsa, and that caused the uproar and the Palestinians to be discontent, was that the scene of why things escalated, and then obviously you had the situation in Sheikh Jarrah?
Yes, that's precisely the scene. They prohibited people from going to pray. They started threatening them with bombs, with flashbangs, and they threatened them inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And also the Sheikh Jarrah issue escalated the problem even further.
Yeah, no. So some of the pictures that we saw were very distressing, and we were hoping that it wouldn't escalate. And then, obviously, over the next few days leading up to Eid and beyond, it was a full-on warfare where Hamas got involved, and then you had the missiles and the F-16s and so on getting involved. And unfortunately, over 300 Palestinians, half of those are women and children, have now been killed. At the same time, there's about 12 Israelis were killed as well. Many more, hundreds and thousands, were injured and also lost their homes as well and infrastructure. Are you able to describe a bit more in detail as to the impact on the human life and on the human quality of life as a result of this recent conflict?
Yes, of course. On the 20th of May, the Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza announced that the death toll from the Israeli bombing of the Strip has risen to 232 people, including 65 children and 39 women, and 1,910 injured, which later increased to more than 300 people killed by the 21st of May. Furthermore, reports by the Palestine Red Cross Crescent Society stated, following Friday prayers on the 14th of May, thousands of Palestinians protested in more than 200 locations across the West Bank. More than 500 Palestinians were injured across the territory as a result of protesters being hit by Israeli rubber bullets, tear gas, and live fire. The Palestinian Health Ministry further added 10 Palestinians were killed by Israeli forces during the protests across the occupied West Bank. It is worth noting that figures increased since then as the ceasefire only took place on the 21st of May.
No, absolutely. So we know that even the loss of one life is one too many, but to have these, hundreds, is just not acceptable as well. And that's not to add there was also bombing of universities, hospitals, and also a press building, Associated Press building, where they were given an hour's notice in order for them to evacuate and clear the building on the say so that it was a safe haven for the Hamas. With your contacts on the ground, was there any element of truth in what the Israeli government said with regards to that building?
Yes, that's first of all, they don't do it for every building. We need to note this and highlight it. The only reason they do this is that so they could find an excuse for their brutality. They say we only target buildings that contains Hamas militants, but then they come out and say and boast about the fact that they ring them 1 hour before. So the Hamas militants, as they would say, will have a chance to escape. So the idea of this, of them giving them a heads up for them to escape, is utter nonsense. If this was the case, there won't be this number of deaths and killings in Palestine and in Gaza especially.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I suppose conversely, I know I've heard it on the social media that, the Israeli defense is the most modern, the most well-equipped in the whole of the Middle East. It is probably in the top 5 in the world. Why would someone like Hamas use these homemade missiles to go up against the Israeli defense, knowing that they are going to suffer much more disproportionately in the numbers you mentioned? It's almost like 1 for every 10 equivalent. Wouldn't it be better just to sort of almost, not to escalate things, but maybe try to just use the lobbying and try to use the mediation in order to come to a reasonable solution?
Absolutely, of course. And the idea that they say it's a conflict, And all of the media, the Western media, they mention it as a conflict which is further from the truth. It is not
Yeah.
a conflict. You well said that the equipment between both sides, between Hamas and Israel, is disproportionate. You're talking about one of the most powerful militaries in the world, top four, and then you talk about Hamas, who makes their own rockets and digs tunnels. So the idea of it being a conflict as if it's a fair-sided game is further from the truth. It is not a fair-sided game. It's oppression, it's brutality from the Israeli side.
No, no, absolutely. But back to the Shahem about the point about, maybe for Hamas not to get involved in such a more powerful opponent, and to use the International Court of Justice, use the UN, and the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Countries, to try to come to a peaceful arrangement. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, when it comes to international communities, the main purpose of international communities is to sanction like states like Israel, when it clearly disobeys the rule of law and ensure Palestinian rights are not violated. That's the role of the international communities. But let's be honest, when we're talking about a state such as Israel, which has disrespected and ignored multiple international law resolutions throughout the years, examples of this is the United Resolutions 446, 452, 465, 471 and 476 resolutions explicitly state that Israel's occupation is illegal. Furthermore, the resolution 446, adopted on the 22nd of March 1979, has confirmed that Israel's settlements have no legal validity and pose a serious obstacle to peace. Even the International Court of Justice in 2004 found the settlements to be illegal under international law. And furthermore, Israeli settlements are actually illegal under Israeli law too. On the 9th of June 2020, the Supreme Court of Israel voided 8-1 an attempt by the Knesset, which is the Israeli parliament, to legalize occupation settlements of unauthorized and privately owned land in the West Bank. The petitioners alleged that the Knesset was not authorized to adopt the law because it contained arrangements that were unconstitutional and inconsistent with international law. So the idea of them actually ignoring their own law, what makes us think they're going to respect international law?
Thank you, Shahem. I think one thing that certainly was different this time round compared to the previous conflicts, if we can call it a conflict, is that it wasn't just in the West Bank and also in Gaza, but actually in main Israel. A lot of Arabs and Jews were fighting. A lot of the Arabs who are normally quiet and not causing any trouble, this time they also felt that this was a great injustice, and they also took the streets, and also some of the right-wing element within the Israel also went to the street, and there were real clashes there, weren't they?
Yes, there were very clashes, and it was echoed throughout the world, as we see in the protests supporting the Palestinians.
One of the key things that Shahim, the media are accused of is bias. The Palestinians and the ones that are pro-Palestinian are saying that you are biased against us towards Israel, and their sort of supporters are saying these are, against the only democracy in the Middle East. But now everyone who has a phone is a journalist, has power. And what we saw was there was a real disconnect between what we saw in the mainstream media, but also in the social media, where people were showing real pictures there as well. What are your thoughts about how the whole conflict was, aired and commented on by the likes of Sky News and BBC?
Yes, bias is there in the media, and the mass media especially. I'm not going to say all media, but in the mass media. For example, the BBC especially. As you know, over the past couple of weeks, there's been protests all over the UK, varying from Luton, Birmingham, Manchester, London, and so on. The BBC came out and mentioned the protest in London only, and they mentioned only a couple thousand people showed up. They said a couple thousand people showed up, and reports show it was anywhere between 150,000 to 200,000 people that actually showed up. So the bias is clearly there. However, we should not make this stop us in any way. As you rightly mentioned, social media is a key factor of the awareness that's been going on throughout the world and the uproar of the Palestinian supporters throughout the world. If they have the media, we got social media. Um, Throughout the world, social media has been used very widely, and I really believe Israel didn't expect this backlash from social media.
No, no, most definitely. If you look at the if you look at the groundswell on the streets of most countries, a lot of people were out there, showing solidarity with the people of Palestine and saying that we shouldn't be, it's like an open air prison, isn't it, in
Of
Palestine,
course.
whereby even fuel, medicine, electricity, everything is controlled, and it's not just Israel. You also have Egypt on the other side as well, who are really suffocating the people of Palestine and making it really feel like an open air prison. But moving on, I'm just thinking about some of the international partners. We mentioned United Nations. We mentioned the US and the UK, who have a huge responsibility and huge leverage and international influence, and also the Islamic countries as well. Do you feel as though that these are neutral brokers who are trying to get to a peaceful arrangement and have a two-state solution, or do you think that these have a vested interest and they are not impartial?
Yes, when it comes to international communities, regardless if they have an intention of peace or not, they are not working and they're not resolving anything. As I mentioned before, Israel is known for ignoring and disobeying international law. The idea of peace, I mean, I find it ironic when they talk about peace, when arguably the future Prime Minister of Israel, Naftali Bennett, has been quoted to say, "I've killed lots of Arabs in my life. There's no problem with that." So the idea of peace isn't in their vision. Us Palestinians, we have no problem with Jews. We know it's a Palestinian land. They always try to mention that if you're anti-Zionist or anti-Israeli, you're anti-Semitic, which is utter nonsense. We're against a political ideology. It's like me saying I'm against a conservative ideology, which makes me anti-British or anti-Christian. We're not against Jews. We in the protests all over the UK that I've been to, there are some Jews that come and stand with us and support us. So what would they call these Jews? They come and call them their self-hating Jews. So it's utter nonsense from their part. And the fact that there is Zionist, non-Jewish Zionists. Biden, the president of the United States, came out and explicitly said, "I'm a Zionist." So how can I be anti-Semitic against Biden? He's not Jewish. So this is used, the idea of being anti-Zionist is anti-Semitic is a distasteful and dirty tactic used by the Israelis in order to keep people quiet. And I want people to know that it's okay to criticize a state. There's no problem with it. It's okay to criticize its ideas. You're not anti-Semitic and you're not racist and you're discriminatory if you do so.
Thank you, Shahem. I think it is important to make that distinction that the freedom, the cause that you are fighting for is a humanitarian cause, and that you're not here to in any way incite any kind of violence or hatred towards the Jewish people. And there's a significant number of Jewish people that are also standing against some of the human rights abuses that are taking place within Gaza and also the West Bank as well. So moving on now, just talking about some of the political shenanigans that have happened in Israel, whereby for the last couple of years now, Netanyahu is trying to form a government, and unfortunately, for one reason or another, it didn't quite happen. But now we have a new government where it's a sort of a coordination of two or three other parties. Do you think now, with this new change in the government, there may be a change or shift in policy? Have you got much more hope in for a amicable resolution?
Well, as I said, I believe the new prime minister is Naftali Bennett, right? And he's been quoted to say, "I've killed lots of Arabs in my life. There's no problem with that." I mean, the idea of there being a change in the way or their ideologies is far from the truth. They might have disagreements between each other, the parties, but their aim goal is to take over Palestine, occupy Palestine, dispossess and ethnically cleanse the Palestinians. That's their ultimate goal. They all agree on that, regardless of their different opinions they might have elsewhere. So the idea of them having a different ideology, I don't think so.
Okay, and moving on to the political situation within the West Bank and Gaza, we know the West Bank is controlled by Mahmoud al-Abbas, and Gaza is controlled by Hamas. There were supposed to be elections over the last few weeks, but for one reason or another, Mahmoud al-Abbas, in his great wisdom, has decided to cancel them. And at the moment, there's also a bit of a vacuum there as well, not showing, not really knowing who's in control and who's in government. What's your thoughts about, Mahmoud al-Abbas? Because he's been very quiet during this whole conflict, hasn't he?
Yes, he's been very quiet, and it's actually very embarrassing for the Palestinian people to have the leader of the Palestinian land not speak whilst his fellow Palestinians are getting killed, dispossessed, and ethnically cleansed. What we care about is our freedom, regardless who leads us. We want our freedom. We're against the oppressor, and that's about it.
Absolutely. You know, 10 years ago, everyone was talking about a two-state solution. For me, that seems to be further and further away a dream. Do you still think that with everything that's gone on, a a two-state solution is still something that is a viable option, or do you think that there will be Gaza as a controlled, autonomous state, but within the wider Israeli controlled area? What do you think is the future hopes of the people of Palestine?
Well, when it comes to a two-state solution, I don't think the Israeli side, first of all, will agree with it. Even if they say they're open to it, they're not going to agree with it. Benjamin Netanyahu was reported to say that if we do have a two-state solution, we're going to control the Palestinians. We're going to control how much weapons they have. We're going to control everything they do. We're going to watch over them. So, to me, that's not a state. What kind of state has no authority on itself? What, as Palestinians from my side, I do believe that it's Palestine. It's called Palestine. It has been Palestine ever since. My grandmother, before she was kicked out of Palestine in 1948 in the Nakba, she used to tell me stories about how she used to live with Jews and Christians alike in Palestine. So there is no problem. We could have, it's called Palestine. The Jews could live there. We got no problem. The media comes out and says, anyone who's against Israel, you're throwing Jews into the sea. You're starting a new Holocaust, which I find so disturbing. And I mean, our prophet in Islam, peace be upon him, he died with his shield mortgaged with a Jew. So we have no problems with Jews. I stress this point so much because they try to portray us as anti-Semitic when we're standing for our land. They're calling the oppressed anti-Semitic because we're standing against our oppressor. That's what I think.
Yeah, no, thank you, Shahem. And it's been